Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Better Buildings for Humans. I'm your host, Joe Menchefski, and this is the podcast where we look at the impact that the built environment has on our health, our wellness, our productivity, and our general joy of being alive. And of course, we talk about sustainable design as well. I want to introduce you to Brian Bucher. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Let's get started by getting to know you a little bit first. Tell us why you became an interior designer, and then tell us about the path that led you to WD Partners, and then finally tell us about your current work.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's been a little bit of a journey, and I'll try to keep it brief, but growing up, I've always been around an eclectic mix of educators and creatives and business owners and entrepreneurs, so just lots of mentors who were always open to sharing what was going on. And that just was always curious to me, like, how do things work and why is it the way it is? And my grandparents owned a specialty grocery store in a town just east of Hershey, Pennsylvania. And so I got the inner workings of how business was and real estate deals and just all the things that we deal with in commercial design today. Plus, I lived right around the corner from Hershey, Pennsylvania. So like the mecca of, brand immersion. So from a very young age, I can see now all of these influences that got me curious and led to it. And then through that, I wanted to be a car designer. So I ended up going to college at the Cleveland Institute of Art. It's one of the premier schools that the automotive industry kind of taps into, and to have a great industrial design program. It was founded by the great Victor Schreckengost, if you're familiar with him.
I'm not.
He's one of the founding fathers of industrial design in America, and a true Renaissance man, just a wonderful human being. But really just understood, like, what do experiences mean to humans, and how do we develop spaces that are productive? And so I ended up finding car design wasn't for me, but interior design and being immersed in physical space and creating these experiences really resonated. So I probably championed that, being, marrying up my family's business with all of those learnings and my collegiate experiences into my first job, which was in retail design. And I've been there for the last 25 years since, and WD Partners specifically, when I found them and found the partnership, this idea of being brand right and operations right and constructability right, really delivering a full facility that resonates with the consumers, but also performs, just really sang to me. And so today, growing through the ranks, I lead integrated teams through design processes to deliver immersive experiences for the brands that come to partner with us.
Okay, so this is going to be fun. All right, so WD Partners is not your typical sort of architectural design firm. So you guys, and I stole this from your website, is basically you're sitting at the intersection of architecture, branding, and operations, and you just alluded to that in your introduction. But let's talk about that. How does this model of architecture, branding, operations, at that intersection, how does that model change the way you design a building or design a space?
Well, I think it's a little bit of it's the same thing, and then it's the functionality delivers against a very set purpose. So the process and the principles are going to look very familiar. We still go through due diligence. We do prototyping. We go through an execution plan. It's just you start asking different questions to business leaders to understand what their vision is, to get the design principles to then go design a building from. And our business is really built around two core things. One is creating new, and then one is taking what is working today, testing and learning it and scaling it, site adaptations and, making a pure idea work inside a very specific environment in a very specific region.
Can I dig a little deeper on that? So, what
Sure.
kind of information do your clients give you in terms of driving that specific purpose? Do they say, I want it really bright, I want it really dark, I want it to feel softer, I want it to feel, vibrant and energetic? What sort of parameters do they give you to work with?
Yeah, I mean, usually it's very much these brand principles around we want to evoke this kind of feeling and we serve this type of demographic. And especially with the business leaders and the operations, they have a vision, but they're not architects and they're not designers. So they have words and philosophies and theories and that's the true meaning of design, right? Is to translate visions into actionable direction. And so yeah, so you're collecting all of these things, and it's why our strategists and design team members are so important because they're experts in listening and extracting data and turning that into design data points that architects and engineers can ultimately turn into, yes, we want a light, bright space, and we need to be able to make our baristas be very functional in the morning. And that creates odds, right? Like we can talk about glass and the retail principles. You want to be able to see in, you want to have the action, you want to draw the customer in. Well, if the strip center happens to be Eastern facing and your peak time is morning and the store is 3,000 square feet, now we got to figure out how to deliver that for the guest, but also not blind the barista and, allow them to be comfortable in their work so they bring the best to the customer and they can actually perform their job.
Right on. Okay. The interesting thing about retail, or some retail, is that they tend to be national brands, international brands even. So scaling is a really important thing. Does that process change when scaling is a factor?
Your starting point and the criteria for success starts with what the brand needs and all of the things that make a living brand. So what is the product? What is the processes? And those are the things that you build the solution around alongside, physics and, the things that make a building structurally sound and actually stand up and be comfortable to be in. And so when you're working at scale, it's much more about designing alongside principles and guidelines and standards that people can rally around together and you can repeat them. Because it's really hard to be predictable and consistent if every one of your 2,000 stores is inherently different, and that trickles down to everything, right? Like employee satisfaction, customers getting what they expect when they show up, all of the above.
Do you have to? I'm going off script a little bit here, but I want to ask this question. How do you adapt? When there needs to be some predictability. McDonald's looks like a McDonald's everywhere you are, but culturally, there's some pretty significant differences if it's a McDonald's in Vietnam or in Tokyo or in England even. I went to a McDonald's in London a couple of years ago, and it was a different experience for sure. It looked similar, but the way people moved through the store was just completely different. Is that your role to take that into consideration, that you're going to have to adapt to these different cultures and different environments?
Yeah, I think ultimately designers and architects have a role in that. There's also some very smart marketers and strategists who figure out what the mindset of each user group is, and then also the type of setting that it's in, right? Like even within the US, you can't serve an urban customer in the same way that you would serve a customer in suburbia. And when you look at brands like Starbucks or Kava or Shake Shack, and where they have to evolve as a company to understand that, and then the physical space has to respond to that as well. Community tables in New York City are kind of a necessity because rent's really high and people are used to being squished together, and just, the whole sense of humanity that comes with urban settings. You put that in, rural suburbia America, and people want their own little sense of space. And that's just natural, right? Because people gravitate to things they're familiar with and what they're comfortable with.
But how does that roll out across, the growth of the company and the design of the company?
Well, and that's where the prototype needs to be flexible and also a large enough kit of parts. So
Right.
part of scale is developing a prototype. And I'm not talking about the 1980s prototype where every chain restaurant looks exactly the same and you try to figure out how to fit that into a jurisdiction. I'm talking about there are set principles and design standards and truths that have to be in every location. And then and I call it the 80-20 rule. You want 80% of what you're delivering to be the same all the time so that you can take the 20% that needs to be agile or adaptable and have enough in the kit of parts that feels right for the brand, that aligns to the emotions and the experience that you're trying to create, and adapt that in a way that makes sense in that instance. And we always want to test and learn, right? So there's always influencers that are coming in. These are living brands. You just need something that we can replicate at the same time and build consistency around. And that's really the difference between scale and doing a one-off building, from my experience, is the ability to create a repeatable kit of parts and rules that large groups of people can repeat with consistency.
Do you want to bring lots of healthy, beautiful natural light in your building and still meet energy codes? Try Solera from Advanced Glazings. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Very good. All right. The tagline for WD Partners is extraordinary experiences everywhere. Great tagline. I love it. How does that manifest itself into actual design practices?
Magic. All no.
You wave the wand and poof.
Yes.
It's
No,
extraordinary.
it's a mission statement and an aspiration, right?
Yeah.
So, it's a call to action. In today's day and age, with transparency and access at our fingertips and options, like, good enough is a great business plan to go out of business.
Right.
You have to strive for extraordinary, because if you're not, somebody else is. And how we do that at WD is the obvious. We work with our client partners to build extraordinary B2C experiences, but we're also building partnerships and teams that can collaborate and work with our clients in real, meaningful, value driving ways. So one of the ways we do that is all of our experts, which run from strategists to fire safety engineers, are in-house WD associates. So we're able to build relationships and trust. And a lot of our clients, like a large percentage of our clients, have been with WD for years, many of them decades. And so when you can build trust and relationships, and we understand their business and their pain points, then we can work together to really solve challenges and deliver extraordinary experiences. Whether that's, hey, I know we're talking about, how we get, life safety trafficking through this back corridor of a kitchen, but we got to move some equipment around, and you guys are a restaurant with like productivity, like it's a mini factory, right? So let me go grab one of my operations engineers and let's just hash it out. In a half an hour, we can solve problems, versus the alternatives where you got to bring people together and you got to get them onboarded. And so it's just making it easy, just like going to a store today. You got to make it easy for the customer. You got to be proactively prepared for it. And then you got to give them something that's meaningful at the end of the day.
That's terrific. I like that. All right. I want to talk about operations. So you guys integrate operations into your design process. How early in that process are you talking about operations in the design process? Like right from at day zero?
Day one is not too soon. I think, back to my last point, it goes back to understanding the customer's business, right? So to design a great space, you need to understand what humans want to need, but you also need to know what the business is trying to achieve and how are they uniquely that brand, and how do they operate, and how do we deliver a space that is fantastic to be in, but also productive. I mean, one of the goals of these buildings, right, is to drive revenue and to create immersive experiences. So they have to perform.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I had a guest on recently who their company designed kitchens specifically, like for restaurants, and they did kitchen layout. They had to know, is it a pizza oven type kind of place? Is it a high end? Is it a fast turn, quick turn type scenario? And they got down to the level of choosing the oven and the placement of the oven and the space and that. Like, did you guys go down to that sort of level of detail in ops?
We can, yeah. It's
Okay.
there's a lot of science that goes into that, and storage space, and capacity, and labor model. Like, yeah, there's people way smarter than I in the organization that help on that. But yeah, it's true.
I was
And
blown
that's
away
where,
that that even existed. That
yeah,
there was even an expertise in that.
and for me, that's where the fun is, because that's where building exceptional experiences happen. It's one thing to design a great experience for humans to be in, but when you're talking about retail buildings, that only solves one third of the problem. It also needs to be constructible, you know? So it also needs to deliver on something differentiated and on the brand. So yeah, it's sometimes it's the architects and the engineers pushing on the business leaders and the operations, and sometimes it's operations saying this is really important and a priority for success. And that's where creativity comes in. That's what I get really excited about is how do we solve that problem? Because that one's hard. But when you crack the code, man, that's where the magic happens.
I learned something recently, and it really ties into some of the things you were just talking about, and then even the conversation earlier about the barista. So, you drive in a lot of retail spaces, you drive better customer experiences by making sure that you take care of the employees properly, right? So I'm
Mhm.
working with a large retail chain right now that are having glare problems. I work in the world of architectural daylighting when I'm not doing this. And so I just assumed that they wanted to focus on daylighting. We're going to talk about the Heshong Mahone studies and all that in just a minute, but my expectation was that they wanted to do daylighting better so that it would drive a better experience for the customers. But they were like, no, we've got cashiers who are blinded, and there's certain stores where like nobody will work at cash register 11 because the glare problem is too consequential. So they were designing, we are fixing a glare problem for them because of the employees, not because of the experience of the customer. But the better employee, the happier, sorry, happier isn't the right word, but the employee who's comfortable and motivated and not being driven by bad environmental factors is going to give a better experience to the customer. Yeah. Can you add anything to that? Like, can you maybe even give me an example or two where you're designing to make the employee a better ambassador of the brand?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah. How many do you want?
Just pick a couple,
Yeah, but,
two or three, whatever you'd like. Because I love hearing these
yeah,
stories.
and I'm excited that, now with online and just the labor dynamics in our society today, not that people weren't paying attention to or cared about their employees before, but now like it's a mandate, like it's not an option. And so, and everyone wants to do the right thing. So they don't always know how. And that's where designers and architects, like we can really help business to create beautiful buildings that function the way you're talking about, but also, okay, so let's find a creative way to do this. I think about restaurants back when I started in my career. The managers were like, their office was a closet in the hallway to the cooler, and their side table was the glazing bin with the lid on it. Like, that is not setting up someone for success. Or putting a new employee in the drive-through window, that the cardboard that says please pull up to the next window to do training, that's a function of a failed design versus really thinking through a holistic solution of, okay, I know we only have so much space, like how do we deliver that better, or how do we create an alternative way to do the same thing to deliver that. And so part of it is, organizations realizing, okay, we need to build the proper amount of square footage to do this. We need a proper office. And sometimes it's, well, maybe we can make no daylighting in an odd, like we work with a car dealership brand, and they have sales associates that spend most of their time with the customer in these beautiful showroom spaces. but they have to do some back of house work functions as well. You need to treat those employees in a different way, and you can consolidate space because they have options and they spend more of their time in open environments with natural lights, with views. And then your accounting office, they're in that office for their whole shift. So they need more space and the right functionality and sight lines out and proper daylighting and the ability to just feel good in the space, more comfort controls. So it's really about understanding the use and the human dynamics and marrying that up with what's happening in the space and what are the dynamics there. I think the hard part about retail is you're putting a lot of these spaces and siting buildings inside of developments where the space is already there. And that's when I said earlier, you need a good kit of parts. You don't always have the luxury of, we're going to site the building in this northeastern way for these reasons. And we have all of this green space and we can tier up the hardscaping to the building. Like sometimes you have a drive through and you're facing the wrong direction. And that barista needs something to make his space warm and comfortable and productive.
Yeah, I mean, in an urban setting, you want to do daylighting, and then there's a skyscraper to the left and a skyscraper to the right and a skyscraper across the street. And, you're not always handed a clean slate, a true greenfield sort of design situation. So there's some interesting challenges for you there. I want to talk about something else that you alluded to just a little while ago, the online world now, right? It's a very different game. You've got, well, obviously we've got, the Amazons, etc. There's a lot of online ordering. What do you do to bring people into, a physical space? Like, are there tips, tricks, techniques? Is there any sort of magic that hoops that you have to jump through, Brian, to try to bring people into a physical space versus just going online and clicking?
Yeah, well, I think first it comes back to creating an exceptional experience and a reason for being there. As we all know in this industry, one of the great things about a building is it's fully immersive. You can have virtual reality and you can put goggles on but there's something about being able to control the sense and lighting and the materiality and the human interaction and really touch the full senses of a human being with a physical space that you can't get online. And I think it's really exciting for architects and engineers and designers and people in this industry right now, because online has taken away some of the burden of the store and allowed it to be this very experiential, very full manifestation of the brand that is trying to be conveyed, the experience, the product that you're trying to touch. It doesn't have to be stack it high and let it fly. Now it needs to be immersive. Now it needs to be showrooming. Now we got to get all the capacity for the community in this box, and we got to ship it to your door. Hey, I need help understanding how this product's going to benefit my life. Going back to the car example, I'm buying the second largest purchase of my life next to my house. I want to validate that's right before I write that check. I want to sit in the seats. Online is great for endless aisle. You can see every car. There's high definition photographs of the doorknobs and the tire tread and every detail, but you still want to sit in it and test it and feel really good that, yes, this is it.
I spoke to several car retailers over the last few years. Daylighting is a big thing for them, and glare is a huge thing for them. And they tell me that now they know what they want when they walk into the store. It used to be they come in, they'd start with, how big is your family and how many people are riding and how far are you driving and all those sorts of questions that the salespeople were taught to ask. And now they walk in, they know what they want, and they even know approximately what they can expect to pay because all that information is online. But they want that last bit of reassurance, right? And is there a different sort of approach to the space, and the design and feel of the space when it's really just about, I need to sit in it and I just need to make sure that it feels good when I put my hands on the steering wheel?
Yeah, I mean, it just really needs to respond to that need, right? So now the needs are different. Now it's about, confidence and trust. And the used car industry is probably a great example of, what do you think of when someone says, hey, what's your first impression of the used car industry? So now that you know what you want, there's also this opportunity to create a sense of place and hospitality and warmth and get people out of offices because you're not going through options on a computer anymore. You're not filling out a special order form. Like, you have questions. You want to be able to get in and out fast. So the space needs to respond to that, both from how do I feel when I'm in it, and how do we take away things like, lights glaring everyone from 10 to 12 in the morning, to it just feels good to be here. Let me breathe for a minute while the finance guy goes and finishes out something that they had to check off for me. Oh, like, I can see the car. I'm going to walk out there. Like, it's set up to be so much more immersive. And again, it doesn't have to do everything anymore. So what it does need to do, it just needs to deliver harder on.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight. You actually can narrow delivery parameters a little bit. What's that scenario, right? Like, it's a little more focused design.
Tired of ugly blinds blocking your view? Imagine solving glare and heat gain without fighting the blinds and without replacing your glass. Glare Repair by Solera is here. Learn more at advancedglazings.com/glare repair.
Let's talk daylight a little bit. It is my world, and I always try to sneak it in. So we're going to sneak it in. Everybody knows about the work that was done in the late 90s by the Hashang Mahon Group, studies that showed these dramatic increases in retail sales when you have natural light in the stores. Is that top of mind for you guys? Is it top of mind for your clients still?
Yes, the short answer is yes. I think the studies and the knowledge around all of that and the benefits, heck, the internet has done a great job of that too. Podcasts and articles, and it's not 1945. You don't have to wait for Walter Cronkite and the evening news to hear, or the newspaper to be delivered. So I digress. But so I think between people understanding how natural light and being outside and all of these things that our human nature responds to, paired with, we need to retain our employees. We need them to be at their best so they deliver for their best. We want retention. We want happy customer. All of these things just lead the way to that. I think how we interact with our clients really depends on, are you dealing with business leaders and folks that their expertise is not in architecture and design, or are you dealing with corporate architects? And, the end result's the same, but it's really about, how much educating and helping people understand the benefits and why it's important to put this in there are, versus, okay, how do we technically get it in there and fit it in alongside the equipment and everything else? And then also, where do we not want it? Like, if you're an X-ray tech, you don't want daylight blowed in there. You want to be able to see what's on the monitor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. We're going to have a couple of fun questions to finish this up, Brian. And this one is a little personal. I'm going to read off 4 scenarios, all right? Like design scenarios, like sort of project work. Tell me which scenario you like the most and which one you like the least, and then tell us why. The first one is designing for a store or a restaurant in a mall. Second, number 2, designing for a store or a restaurant in an existing building in a dense urban setting. The third, designing for a store and a restaurant, call it a new build, in a suburban setting, like the sort of strip mall or, that kind of setting. And then designing for a store and a restaurant in a complete open greenfield setting, total new build. Which of those 4 do you like the most, just your own pleasure, and which one do you like the least?
Oh gosh, what a great question. Man, they all have their own appeal for very different reasons. I think for me personally, remodels, the constraints that are in there, kind of, again, like going back to that 80-20 rule I said earlier for myself, is when you have a white piece of paper, you have to be creative enough to fill the white piece of paper, but you can do anything. So I think greenfield, it doesn't scratch the itch as much for me, because there's a lot of utilities and site dynamics and different jurisdictional play. Like, it's that kind of a puzzle that you start to solve, where, as a designer at heart and an experienced person, to take an existing condition and start to really get into like, okay, so what can we reuse and how do we take this existing, like, hey, we put the entire bar in the basement because we're off Broadway in New York City. Like, how do we get customers down? Like, well, wait a minute, your brand's all about seeing in now. Like, so for me, it's the puzzle and the payoff of how can we make this the most sustainable as possible and leverage assets are there. And then also, how can we make something new and exciting with it? And when you can deliver that and walk out at the end of the day and like, man, we took this rusty, tired, challenged place and we made it into that, there's nothing more exciting than to feel that at the end of the day and be like, man, we made something new again. This is fantastic.
The before and after pics are, it makes it all worthwhile.
And like the challenges that you have to overcome there, they're different. So that's where I think all of those 4 scenarios are great in their own right. I enjoy all of them. It's just being a designer, I like to solve physical problems and beautify them, and that scratches that itch.
Very cool. All right, one more fun question. If you could eliminate one design trend, specifically in the chain restaurant world, because it's overused or ineffective or whatever, what would that trend be, and maybe why is it still showing up?
Oh gosh, another great question. You know what I would say, and I use it a lot out of necessity, is banquet tables in restaurants. They exist for efficiency and throughput, not experience. If you want a bar top, you put a bar top in. If you want to tuck yourself into a corner, you do booths and tables that have views and ambiance and sight lines into the kitchen. And this is the opinion of one, but in my mind, banquets exist because you need butts in seats and you need to drive a certain amount of revenue, but it is not the first choice for seating, Super flexible, you can put lots of parties together. Again, it's a little bit like the prototype of the 1980s. One size fits all works, it solves the functional needs, but it doesn't solve the other experiential needs.
I like that. Very cool. All right. We've reached the point in the show where I ask my $1 million question. I think this is going to be about episode 140 something. And so I've asked the question about 140 times. And I ask every guest to answer it from whatever perspective they'd like. And here it is. What makes a great building?
Yeah, I'm glad you've asked that 140 times because you've made me think about it for a while, and I really appreciate that. For me, it's a building that responds to the environment that it lives in. And what I mean by that is it's supporting the function of the reason that exists, but it's also a good citizen. I mean, when we build buildings, it is a part of the community. People drive by it every day. They get their groceries there. They have their doctor visits and meet with, specialists in these places. It is a landmark as much as anything else. So I think as designers and architects, we have a responsibility to make sure that our buildings are good citizens for the people that are using it and the people that have to live by it. You can't just build a box. You got to make something special.
That is a great answer. All right. One last thing, Brian. Do you have any announcements, any exciting events coming up, anything you'd like to share or promote?
So, yeah, the one thing about WD does with our thought leadership is we're continuously in tune with our customers and all of their pain points. So we publish Wayfind as part of our thought leadership strategy. If listeners want to subscribe to that, they can go to our webpage, wpartners.com, and subscribe to Wayfind. It's at the bottom of the landing page. And it's a great place to just find articles about all kinds of topics, technical design and strategy and operations, and just all kinds of articles related to what our industry is dealing with, the hot topics of the day from all of our experts.
Fantastic. Brian, thank you so much. That was a great episode. That was a wonderful conversation. I appreciate it.
Likewise, and thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, you take care.
All right, goodbye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Buildings for Humans. For more information on the world's best light diffusing and highly insulating glass glazing, please visit advancedglazings.com.